Fellow in the University's Forensic and National Security Sciences Institute. Koppl has served on the faculty of the Copenhagen Business School, Auburn University, Fairleigh Dickinson University, and the Auburn University at Montgomery. He has held visiting positions with the New York University, University of Oslo, and the Max Planck Institute of Economics. Professor Koppl is a past president of the Society for the Development of Austrian Economics and a former editor of Advances in Austrian Economics. His research normally includes theories or economic subjects of the theory of experts, complexity theories, the production and distribution of knowledge in society, and he has been featured in Forbes magazine, Reason magazine, Slate, the Huffington Post as well. And he has the 2016-2017 Hayek Distinguished Visiting Professor for the FA Hayek Program for the Advanced Study in Philosophy, Politics, and Economics. And he is also the recipient of the Eleanor Ostrom Prize and the Templeton Freedom Award. And welcome, Dr. Koppl.
That's wonderful, thank you. That was a very gracious introduction. I didn't send her like all these prizes that I got. She's been on the internet. Before I speak about what a wonderful gift this is for anyone, Valentine's Day is coming soon. Nothing says I love you like expert failure. I wanted just to exploit this opportunity to be here and meet all of you and enjoy the ambience here, to say a few words about the Institute for an Entrepreneurial Society. We at Syracuse University in the Whitman School of Management, a couple of us have founded this Institute for an Entrepreneurial Society. And the key thing that we do is we admit a truly select group. In fact, we don't always admit students, and we won't be admitting students to the program again as fellows for the Institute until September 2021. Okay. So who's a junior now? Wait a minute, that was fine. Let's see. All right, good. Or you take a sort. There are many things you can do between an undergraduate and graduate. We admit 4 students, a cohort of 4 students. It takes, I guess, 3 or 4 years to get through the program for our PhD program. Okay. We are training. We have speakers, this, that, and the other thing. We're expanding now. Are working on the idea of doing white papers and policy pieces. But the core of the enterprise is training the next generation of entrepreneurship scholars. And the Syracuse, you can, like Google this and check it out, like that. The Syracuse Entrepreneurship Department is like a top department. It's a very good department in entrepreneurship. So what does that all mean? Well, entrepreneurship is a new field. I'm not sure we can even call it a new discipline. It's still somewhat in a formative stage, in my opinion, intellectually, which makes it awesome because it's very open texture. It's a new field, studying just what the title seems to indicate. What is entrepreneurship? How does it function in society? Do we want it? Do we need more of it? Should we be trying to encourage it? How? What would that mean? And it's become, this explosive thing. It's like growing, it's fabulous. And it is a great place for young scholars. We're doing social science in the business school, and we are largely free of dogmatic constraints. So how many are like, yeah, economics, man, that's the thing for me. I'm thinking maybe even graduate school in economics. You could do worse. Worked out for me. But there is still a kind of mainstream, I guess I won't say orthodoxy, to hold a discussion about that, something like an orthodoxy and mainstream in economics. It's much better than when I started. I mean, it's a much more interesting field. We have evolutionary game theory, we have we have experimental economics, we have all kinds of stuff that I didn't know about as an undergraduate. Sorry. But there still is this kind of constraint. Entrepreneurship is open. Okay? And we, the Institute for Entrepreneurial Society, the faculty there, we know what our theoretical vision is. Okay? Our theoretical vision is three things: Kerzner, Kerzner, and Kerzner. And we have a program of applied research in entrepreneurship studies, if you want, entrepreneurial studies, I like to call it, where we bring the tools of, how many of you know public choice theory? At least, you know, somehow, maybe I've heard of it or something. Yeah, okay, a lot of you, yeah, we're bringing the tools of public choice theory to the sort of subdiscipline, the budding subdiscipline of entrepreneurship policy. So, you know, you have basically a bunch of management professors. They don't know what public choice theory is all about. They see the value of entrepreneurship, and they're like, yeah, we have to have policy to support entrepreneurship. But they don't have a theory. They don't have a theory of government or policy making. Okay. Well, we got one. Thank you. Right? Called public choice theory. So I'm very excited. We really believe in it. So keep us in mind. Syracuse University, Charles knows who I am, Ivan knows who I am. Syracuse University, Institute for an Entrepreneurial Society. Come study with us, be brilliant, we love you, it'll be great. Our model, just two more words and then I'll do what I was asked to do when I was invited here in the first place. Our model is that when you step on campus with us as a fellow of the Institute for an Entrepreneurial Society, being trained to become a management or entrepreneurship fellow of a professor in a so-called R1 research university, when you step on campus, you are now a scholar. Start writing. Okay? It's like a mentorship program. That's kind of how we run it. All right, so thank you for that opportunity to give that advertisement. I have damaged your microphone apparently. I will be here. These are my cards. Now, what about expert failure? Very importantly, entrepreneurs, in the relevant sense, are not experts. He either said that I was screwy or the microphone came unscrewed. I'm not sure which. All right, so again, thank you for the introduction. Remember what I said. Okay? When Valentine's Day comes along, you know, nothing says I love you like expert failure. This book, of course, is based on my great expertise in failure. It's really based on my work in forensic science, which has been featured in Forbes and all stuff like that. The Atlantic, I was proud of that one. And which was great because there's no ideological charge on forensic science. Okay? Nobody's going to stand up and say, we want forensic scientists to make errors. Okay? So it was really a good sort of proving ground for ideas on expertise that we may then sort of port over to more contentious, ideologically charged issues. Okay? So here's an example. I first want to if I just talk like this, can you hear me? Okay. So I first want to just convince you that it is a problem, that I'm dealing with a problem and I'm not just like, you know, burrowing into some obscure little, you know, academic foxhole or something like that. It's a problem and it matters. So this from a recent New York Times, what is that, November 3rd, 2019, it's quite recent. These machines can put you in jail. Don't trust them, man. That's right. So there's these breath, you know, breathalyzers, a brand name, breath alcohol test devices. Okay, with breathalyzer being just a brand name. So, you know, they can pull you in most states, things vary from state to state. Most states, no, they can pull you over, require you to take the test. You don't take the test, it's presumptive that your license will be removed. That's again varying from state to state. I don't know what it is here in Michigan. So, you know, depending on state, I mean, like that, you can go to jail because of those machines. Because what they have to be calibrated. If they are not properly calibrated, they can give, you know, an overly sensitive reading, reporting you to be over the limit when you're not. Okay? Of course, malcalibration could get you errors in the other direction, but which do you think is going to be the more common error? Well, the revenue enhancing error might probably be the more common error. I'm confident that's true. There's been some big scandals in New Jersey and elsewhere on exactly this theme. So that's, I think, a vivid example of expert failure and indeed forensic failure that may touch anybody here who has a driver's license and enjoys drinking alcoholic beverages. Personally, I mean, if I'm going to be driving, I won't have even one drink, period, thank you, no. Right, thus from the New York Times, but of course the New York Times itself has its examples of expert failure, salient among them, the failure to recognize the spuriousness of all evidence in favor of so-called weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. The New York Times did issue this kind of mea culpa after, you know, it was evident that after the pretense could no longer be maintained that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, saying, what does that say? They noted a number of instances of coverage that was not as rigorous as it should have been. Gee, you think? So expert failure is starting to look like a real thing. It can be expert failure can give us faulty forensics. It can give us fake news. It can be a technical problem. Okay, a pop quiz. What's the structure collapsing there? Somebody was whispering it. A bridge. The Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Nobody was like killed or injured when it collapsed. So you can YouTube it, Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapsing, and take full, pleasure in it, guilt-free pleasure, because no one was hurt. Okay. So that shouldn't have happened. That happened like 9 months after the open, something like that. I mean, it just right away fell apart. Be a business problem, right? This is getting to be an archaic example, but a few years ago, Samsung phones were just like blowing up on people, burning them and stuff. It can be an economic problem. Probably some people in the room recognize him. Who's that? Really? Nobody recognize him? Yeah.
Is that Alan Greenspan?
That is indeed Alan Greenspan. Yeah. The greatest central banker of all time. You have to read the fawning things written about him by the academic mainstream macroeconomic profession to appreciate how dreadful and fawning and servile it really is. Well, the greatest central banker of all time was not able to foresee or, importantly, prevent the Great Recession. And he did indeed have a mea culpa of his own, confessing to a flaw in his model of capitalism. It is my conjecture that two important cases of expert failure, and I don't think I think this is an opinion you can get from others, but with others, it is my conjecture that two important cases of expert failure in the United States contributed greatly to a shift toward populism in the American electorate. One was the Great Recession of 2007-2009. Some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, I thought it was fall of 2008. Yeah, that's when there was like the financial meltdown. But the recession is 2007-2009. So sometimes people will talk about the 1 year, the other, okay. don't play gotcha on that one. Practically any of those 3 years that you say would be like okay. Anyway, so the one that sort of great episode of export failure was the Great Recession, together with the subsequent bailouts, right, in which big players were saved, but ordinary Americans, many of them, ended up unemployed or maybe underwater on their mortgages, wherein they owed more on the mortgage than the house was actually more worth, or both. So people could see who got bailed out and who didn't. The other one, I think, the other big, there's multiple examples, but the other really big one of contributing to the shift to populism, in my view, is the debacle about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, together, of course, with the subsequent war, which American soldiers were killed, and I mean, wow, we don't really know how many, but I mean, apparently really a lot of Iraqis, including, of course, not military, but just ordinary citizens. That was like a big deal. Here's another big deal. Anybody happen to know what that image? You were nodding your head. Where was that picture taken? Do you happen to know?
Flint, Michigan.
That was taken in Flint, Michigan. And the health and environmental experts in the state of Michigan and in the federal government were like, no, the water's cool. Well, boil it first, but it's fine, you can drink it. And it's brown, lead-filled poison. This in a hospital sink, right, in whatever the indicated date was, October 16, 2016. About the same time, this is February 19th, 2016. This one could be contrived. I think it's probably for real. I trust that hospital image, but it's even darker water. At least it's more evident how dark the water is in that one. But guy posted it somewhere on his blog, I guess, saying, the water in my basement, 2/19/2016. This to me is really a big deal. I don't understand why it's not a bigger deal in American consciousness. I mean, our health experts, the government experts responsible for ensuring and testing and ensuring the quality of the drinking water of the citizens of Flint, Michigan, not only failed to, they affirmed the possibility of it. And in fact, there's now evidence that I suspect is quite correct and not spurious, that many children in Flint, Michigan, large percentages are suffering intellectual defects, presumably non-trivial intellectual defects, presumably because of the lead poisoning they experienced by drinking Flint water. Finally, before getting on to sort of more analytical stuff, I want to say a few words about eugenics and population policy. I used to think, I grew up sort of thinking eugenics, oh yeah, that was a terrible thing in the past, and I think, oh, how horrible. Sure, glad that's gone. As recently as 2010, in the California prison system, eugenic practices were happening. If the certain prison officials thought that maybe you, a female prisoner, who's giving birth in the system, is going to re-enter the system, they view you as at risk of recidivism, they would pressure you into a tubal ligation, which is, of course, a form of sterilization. And then again, as recently as 2017 in Canada, in which the reason for being pressured into tubal ligation would, and as far as I can tell, maybe we should say forced into tubal ligation, coerced, probably a better word. Anyway, certainly pressured, seems to be just what one status as an indigenous woman. So that's just, a straight eugenic practice as recently as 2017 in Canada. So I think we need to fear that these kinds of practices continue today, even here in North America. And then even if you don't uphold, to be really eugenics, you gotta think that disfavored characteristics are heritable, disfavored sort of characterological properties of a person, right, are heretical. Population policy does not necessarily require that, but we're getting the argument, I guess for the sake of time, I'll not give as many details as I originally intended, but anyway, we're getting the argument now from guys like Travis Reeder and others, saying that, well, you know, global warming is this big, terrible problem, so we need to restrict who can and cannot reproduce so that the population can be a variable, quote unquote, variable to be manipulated. We better act more promptly right now, and otherwise it might, quote, might turn out to be too little too late. So the more we have, you know, I'm sort of convinced about another work I've done, I've really become alarmed, not only just like, oh, okay, yeah, the scientists say that, I guess I've been really kind of become a person rather viscerally alarmed about so-called global warming and its anthropogenic nature, forgive my mispronunciation. But I don't draw the inference that population should be a variable to be manipulated. I view that inference with alarm. Now, I'm not referring here to, again, some little argument in some corner of academia, well, you know, the nutty professors are supposed to like think of weird stuff, and then there's a filter. No, this stuff is made into popular culture. I don't get all these cable, you know, premium channels and stuff like that, but there's a show on one of the premium channels, or was, called Bill Nye Saves the World. How many of you like to know about this show? Maybe have seen it. Quite a few hands have gone up, yeah. A really stronger majority of hands went up than what I was expecting, actually. So there's Bill Nye, he's got this message. So when it comes, as he says, when it comes to climate change, so should we have policies that penalize people for having extra kids in the developed world? Says Travis Reeder, ethicist of the Johns Hopkins University. He says, well, so I do think that we should at least consider it. Okay. His co-panelists don't seem real pleased with him there if you look at that image. These examples, I hope, make it at least plausible to you that there is such a thing as expert failure, as it is a problem, and it matters. You know, like snowstorms are a problem. Okay? In a sense, that doesn't matter. Right? It matters like we need to be prepared for them and respond appropriately and stuff like that, but we're not going to like prevent snowstorms. Okay? I think the problem of expert failure matters, well, like snowstorms, but also perhaps maybe we can do something about it. So it seems like we need a theory of experts. So far, until this book, if this book even does the job, there was no coherent literature on experts. Rather, there are dispersed different literatures in different, quarters of academia, technology, science and technology studies, sociology, economics, and then people are like not talking to each other. Yeah? So we need, and you can see the problem once you start working on this. You know, I thought I was going to do a survey of the literature. That would be like a survey of human thought. So it's very hard to get to grip on the literature. But we need to do something about the fact that there is a literature, and contemporary today's, contributors to it are often not fighting each other even when they really should be. So I kind of came out with this little 2x2 grid graph that gives a kind of map of the territory. I guess I would say it like that. And then, as simple as this is, I'll explain in just a moment, it's like remarkable. You can just take just about anybody and put them in one of these four boxes. It's amazing. Anybody who's written something that might be relevant to the theory of experts. How often does it happen that such a big, seemingly amorphous field can be organized so simply? It's like it still kind of makes me dizzy. So if you're gonna have a theory of experts, you're gonna have a theory of expert failure, you're gonna have a theory of experts. You're gonna have a theory of experts. Then you gotta have at least two kind of actors in your model. Experts, non-experts. I'll get to a definition of experts later. And then, weirdly, it turns out you can pretty much identify one of two attitudes toward experts, one of two attitudes toward non-experts. Okay? Experts are either like groovy or ungroovy. Publisher didn't like that. I do occasionally catch myself using the word groovy non-ironically. It's just like, so I make the joke about groovy and everything because I don't want you to give too much weight to the words reliable and unreliable. I'm not like they have reliable has like a precise meaning in like statistical decision theory and stuff like that. I just mean like, some general way they're like cool and you can like rely on them. They know better. Or unreliable is like, well, wait a minute, maybe, but maybe not. What about the non-experts? So you can pretty much have one of these two attitudes, like a skeptical or not so skeptical attitude. Skeptical or credulous might have been better, I don't know. What about the non-experts? Well, sort of again, groovy, ungroovy, powerless, empowered. So pretty much people are viewing non-experts either as powerless in the sense of, precisely because they're not experts, they don't know. So they gotta just, defer to the experts. What else are you gonna do? You're not an expert yourself. Yeah. Or you might say, well, at least in certain contexts, certain ways, or certain circumstances, you can somehow not be just in the thrall of the experts. Yeah. So powerless, or at least potentially empowered. Okay. And then you just take any thinker, it's like amazing. Socrates, how many of you know the Apology and love it? That was me. So one of my sources on this stuff, David M. Levy at George Mason University, explained to me, much to my horror, that even Plato we know is Plato's a fascist. Yeah, okay. The Republic really has some remarkable stuff in it. But Socrates, he was the cool guy, epistemic humility. Yeah, wait a minute. If you read Xenophane's version of, I get the name right now, they've had me pasta at dinner now. I want to fall asleep. His version of the Apology, we find Socrates saying, yes, it's true. I do want youth to ignore their parents and obey me. Well, when it comes to education, because you see, I'm the expert. I'll not give the language cynical. Because I'm the expert in education. Right? The generals, you mortify your own judgment, send your own children off, and tell them to obey, to war, and obey the generals, because they're the ones who know, they're the experts. So even Socrates ends up, right, viewing the experts as they're like, epistemically superior, the non-experts should just, shut up and obey. And I think, Francis Galton, J.M. Keynes, Galton, of course, was a eugenicist. So was Keynes, by the way. But be careful with that one, right? I think it was eugenicist. I don't think he was eugenicist. It's not clear what his policy implications were, though, from his eugenic ideas. I think sometimes people stretch that a little more than the evidence allows us to take it. And the fact that he was eugenicist doesn't mean like his economics and that stuff, right? I've taken a lot from his economics, actually, although his policy stance is not one that I share. But just be careful about that. We need to out him. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that we somehow disproved his economics or something like that, because he was a eugenicist. So anyway, those guys are in that box. I kind of think Marx probably belongs in this box. Experts are unreliable, non-experts are powerless. I on purpose didn't listen because he's so contentious. What's he really mean, But at least one version of Marx, everybody's trapped in false consciousness, except and until the proletarian vanguard can finally see clearly. So the experts and the non-experts are, equally, they're unreliable powers. Certainly Mannheim, who the kind of comes out of Marx. Foucault, I think, fits in this box. Foucault, however you say it correctly. People who know how to say French words, please forgive my pronunciation. I love Alfred Schutz, but I think he's actually up here. I love Alvin Goldman, the social epistemologist and philosopher at Rutgers. Robert Merton was disparaged by, people as naive and smart. These guys, I love them all, but they kind of were like, yeah, the experts are cool. So they even had some, idea of like democratic control of experts or something like that. But they didn't really question much that experts are cool. It's only when you get down here, Bernard Mandeville, Peter Berger, Thomas Luckman, Stephen Turner, was not listed here, I'm trying to say David Levy and Sandra Peart. They kind of belong in that box. That's the cool box for me. Let's speak about two of the people in that box, Peter Berger and Thomas Luckman. Okay, the social construction of reality. How many know this title? This book is so celebrated by the social constructionists who view reality as socially constructed. And then they all cite this book. Spuriously, in my view. Any phenomenologists in the room? Right? They were bracketing knowledge and reality in order to identify the social structures of the world. Right? They didn't use the word bracketing, but they're both students of Schutz, who was like, the great follower of Husserl, that Husserl was like, yeah, dude, you get me, dude. Right? So it's clearly, they're just bracketing. Right? And then everybody's like, no, see, they showed the reality socially constructed. They did, really? Where was that? Anyway, this is a wonderful book, and there's a quote from it, and it's very important. It has a theory of experts in it. It's a beautiful theory, and let me give you the quote that I so love from this. I think I'm going to repeat it later. Where is it? I require, they say, not only the advice of experts, but the prior advice of experts on experts. The social distribution of knowledge thus begins with a simple fact that I do not know everything known to my fellow men, and vice versa, and culminates in exceedingly complex and esoteric systems of expertise. They got the point. This is the fundamental epistemic point you gotta have if you're gonna have a theory of experts that's, at least to me, remotely satisfactory. The division of knowledge. This is the point that most people properly attribute to F.A. Hayek. I think it's in footnote for the especially nerdy in the room. Here's a footnote. I used to think Hayek got it from Mises, who speaks at one point of an intellectual division of labor. But I think actually he got it from Mandeville. But I don't think and he wrote this beautiful essay on Mandeville, and at the end of the essay said, well, but Mandeville just made me impossible. So don't worry about it. And he says nothing about the division of knowledge in his essay on Mandeville. I think he got it from Mandeville, didn't know where he got it from. In the middle of social calculation, but he was struggling to get his point across, and he kind of up bubbles this Mandevillian vision of divided knowledge. He writes it down and thinks, hey, I'm clever. I just wrote down this new idea. And later says, that's my big contribution to economics. That's all highly speculative commentary about Hayek. I have not even attempted to prove that in some history of thought analysis, but it's kind of my personal view of it. Anyway, Berger Luckman got the point about divided knowledge. Different people know different things. It's not just that different people know different things. It's the fact that that's actually very important for social science. And not only is that different people know different things, every child knows that, but that it's very important for social science. Not every child knows that, not every scholar knows that, but also sort of how that knowledge is. And I think it's especially clear with Hayek, more than it is with Berger and Luckman, that it's tacit, it's embodied in our traditions, our habits, our customs, and our practices, and so on. It's in this weird form. I've used the word cynicalogically to try to get at that. In fact, there's a whole thing about that in the book. If you want to know about that, Google Austrian epistemics and my name. You can hear her talk. Or ask your beloved to buy you quick comment that was implicit in what I've been saying these last few moments. Berger and Luckman got the division of knowledge idea from their common teacher, Alfred Schutz. Alfred Schutz got it from F.A. Hayek. In fact, it's beautiful. Hayek gives his theory of the dispersed knowledge first in 1937. He presents in 1936, presents the paper in Vienna. Schutz is there. He doesn't get it. He writes a response. You can read in the fourth volume of Schutz's papers. He doesn't get it. But then finally he did get it, and he starts to cite Hayek all the time on that. He gives a lesson to. So Hayek is responsible for the core insight behind the supposed foundational text for social constructionism. So, you know, the affiliation of ideas can be a strange thing. Anyway, you know, they really nail it. I gotta have, you know, experts on experts and all this esoteric division. Now, we're like this. And we want the experts to save us from our ignorance. We want them to be like that. Although sometimes, you know, maybe they're more like that. I will flip out if anybody knows where that's from. Go to City Hall in Siena at the allegory of the good and bad governments in the council room of the City Hall in Siena. It's fabulous. It's beautiful. And that's the allegory of bad government, of course. Ambrosio Lorenzetti, if I'm remembering correctly, the fabulous artist. So, you know, we want our experts to be like that. Maybe sometime they're like that or something, or we're afraid maybe they're going to be like that, or like that. But see, of course, the real truth is, there's Leonardo's Vitruvian man. The real point, of course, is that the experts are human. If you don't model the experts explicitly, you may miss that they're humans. If you're thinking like the experts are great, you're implicitly modeling them like that, and it's implicit, right? I mean, of course, when I put it on your nose, like, yeah, well, that's not right. Or if things go wrong, you may be like, oh, what's wrong with those demons or fools, right? But really, they're humans who are motivated by the same thing as other humans, and in the same degree. So you know, some experts, of course, are good and virtuous and amazing and great. Of course, some experts, like any large group of humans, are actually like bad, you know, in different degrees. Some are. And of course, the same individual sometimes both good and evil, right? That's just, you know, Praxis human nature. Of course, that's all true. Some experts are wise, some experts are fools, but all in the same proportions as non-experts. Experts are not different in their motivations, their character, their anything, just on account of being experts. So, there's room, if experts are human, there's room for a theory of experts. This is Rausch Hall, University of Virginia, 1960 or 1962, maybe 1962. Okay? These are the original founding members of, founders of public choice theory at the University of Virginia. Ronald Coase on the left, Duncan Black, James Buchanan, Ferguson, whose first name I'm blanking on, who I think he died early or something. He ended up not actually producing much of a written legacy. Warren Nutter, Gordon Tullock, and my teacher, Leland B. Yeager. All, unfortunately, now gone. So I call my theory of experts information choice theory as a kind of homage to public choice theory. And it's built on that same insight that's the foundation of public choice theory, right? That we are the same humans, whether we're engaged in market exchange or political exchange. Right? So too are we the same humans, whether we're in the role of the expert or the non-expert. Yeah. I thought there was some other detail I wanted to share with you about why I chose to. Oh well, because just as they gave a choice-based theory of politics, so too do I wish to emphasize that label information choice theory, that the expert chooses what information or advice to share with the non-expert. So in other words, we're putting it into a kind of market theory framework. Now, what's the one thing I haven't done? I actually gave a preview of this one. One thing I haven't done yet that I totally need to do, that I'm going to do now, if I'm going to have a theory of experts. Define who said that. Yeah, I gotta define expert. Yeah. The standard normal way how, with like one sort of non-exceptional, get to very close, that basically nobody has to tell. Everybody defined experts, with this partial non-exceptional, I'll get to in a second. Everybody defined experts as by their expertise. Okay? Well, wait a minute. Oh, no, that's a loser's game. First of all, now I have to like try to second guess who's a true expert and who's a charlatan and stuff like that, right? So this is gonna be a huge impediment to getting any results, getting any progress in a theory of expert failure, because it just reduces to like second guessing the expertise of the different persons, It's not a theory. It's not a theory of expert failure, it's not a theory of experts. And also there's this, which is a complementary point. We have a division of labor. We have a division of labor. The flip side of that is division of knowledge. We each occupy a different place in the division of labor, so we each know different things. So each of us is an expert on their corner of the division of labor. Each of us is an expert on something. So that means everybody's an expert. If we're going to define expert as by their expertise, that means everybody's an expert. But if everybody's an expert, nobody's an expert. And how can the word do any intellectual work for us? Okay? So I need a definition of expert from another theory of experts, information choice theory, that's not based on their supposed expertise or knowledge. What is that definition? An expert is anyone paid for their opinion. Anyone paid for their opinion. So a race car driver, so an economist is definitely an expert. For good or bad, an economist is an expert. A race car driver is not an expert. Stephen Jobs is not an expert. If you want to like race a Formula One, race a Formula One circuit, man, you got to have a lot of knowledge, and it's the team. It's got all the characteristics of knowledge I talk about in my book. It's a team effort, and you've got the dials and stuff. So a lot of your expertise is somehow embodied in the equipment and all this stuff like that. You by ordinary human lingo, you got to be an expert if you want to be an F1 driver, right? But you're not. You're paid to race the car, not to give your opinions. So you're not an expert by the theory of information choice. Stephen Jobs, same thing. Boy, he seems to have some really deep insights about like how humans and computers interact and all sorts of stuff. But we paid him for his computers and his iPhones and stuff like that. We didn't pay him for his opinion. So that's my definition of expert. Oh, the semi-partial exception is in legal theory, an expert witness is distinguished by the fact that they give an opinion, right? If you're called as a witness to like a car accident, and you say, well, I think he was just driving like a nut, or I think he was driving irresponsibly. Right? That's your opinion. We don't need to hear it, right? And one bench or the other can stand up and say, I object, at least if they're doing their job, which they don't always do. Right? So you're just supposed to, what did you see? I don't want your opinion, right? The court doesn't want your opinion. The expert witness, the court is exactly asking, here's the facts, now what's your opinion, what they mean? But that's the theory of expert witnesses. That's not really a general theory of experts. So that exception to the rule of how experts are defined is actually a non-exception. All right, so here's my assumption. So what are my behavioral assumptions then about experts? Well, it's these three things. First of all, experts do not always seek truth. Okay? Duh. But if I have only an implicit model of experts, then I may be implicitly assuming they're these total truth seekers. I see that all the time in forensic science. If I ask you about, CSI, I point out it's a TV show, and you know it's not real and all like that, you're like, okay. But if I don't point that out to you, you might carry around the common implicit model of forensic science. Well, they're scientists. They're like truth speakers, right? So no, we're going to explicitly model our experts as humans. So that means they're not always seeking truth. And they're not smarter than other people. I don't use the econ. Does anybody happen to know the econ lingo for that second assumption? Or realize what I mean in econ lingo? That's a bounded rationality assumption. I don't use the word bounded rationality. Koppl, Phelan, and others have started to criticize that. I think they're right. Blah, blah, blah. But what I say in the book, I say they have limited and erring cognition. That's a kind of bounded rationality assumption, although it's not, so to speak, the common version of what that means. It's, I think, a bit more open. But anyway, yeah, it's not like experts are have some magic pipeline of truth, nothing like that. They're all geniuses or something like that. No, they're humans. And then there's this weird third assumption that I was driven to by my work in forensic science. Incentives skew the distribution even of honest errors. And here's my example. How many of you had to do statistical regression in class, right? Okay. So okay. So you know what happens, right? You get some data set, and then you have a functional form, and you crank the thing in your computer program, and out come some numbers, and you may be surprised or not surprised by what the numbers say. Now, how do actual researching economists or other researchers, what do they do when they get a surprising, especially a result that in some sense they don't want? Right? Because it's not going to get them published, or it's not going to be a breakthrough or whatever. Oh, now wait a minute, we've got this algorithm for inverting matrices. They can get pretty error. There can be an error introduced there. Oh, do I have the latest data set? Oh, do I have coding yet? Right? You're really scrupulous to look for problems. What if instead you get the expected result, the one you think you can publish? Great, it's wonderful, we'll send it to the journal tomorrow. So scientists, statistical analysts, econometricians, economists, I think that the most common thing, is there's this asymmetry in the response to the expected or desired result versus the surprising or undesired result. But if you ask the scientists, do you have this asymmetry? They don't know that they have this asymmetry response, and would, at least many of them, hopefully most of them, would be mortified to think that there was this asymmetry in the response to statistical results, which asymmetry is then producing a bias in their work. They'd be mortified. So it's an honest error. It's not like they know they're cheating or something like that. And yet there they are with that asymmetry that's biasing their results. And something very similar, I think, is true in forensic science work, which is of a different nature than my example is about statistics. Yeah, that's right. In forensic science, if it's am I okay in time?
We don't have a Q&A after this, so probably wrap it up.
Oh, okay, all right, then I'm way behind. So I'll wrap it up as quickly as I can. So I won't talk to you about that. Let me just quickly say, look, so, we've got some principles now. So it turns out that my forensic scientists are working on commission in half the states through something called court assessed fees. Okay? So they're in the police department, and then the lab gets money if their work leads to a conviction, no money if it doesn't. So that's no good. So you start to see why we argue for stuff like they shouldn't be in with the police at all, let alone working on commission. They shouldn't have access to the police file, so they know whether the suspect, what the crime is, and who the suspect is, and stuff like that. And we should like have some redundancy built into the system. Now, it's like a monopoly where, you know, just one lab ever, you know, does the analysis. So, here's the slide that I can't not give. Okay, so maybe we'll make this the last slide. Here's my theory of expert failure. I've got 2 chapters on theory of expert failure in the book. So there's a lot more to it than this, but this is the most important bit of it. This is getting to the most sort of rudimentary architecture of expert failure. And I mean by expert failure, I have purposely got a vague definition. It's like, normally it's like giving an untrue response. But there's reasons why that's not the only way that experts may fail. But that's mostly the idea. So, when do we get, so we want to know, when do you get more expert failure, when less? That's a real question. That's a scientific question. What conditions encourage, what conditions discourage expert failure? Okay. Well, let's see. There's two really vital dimensions for that. Is the expert deciding for the non-expert or just giving them advice? Is the expert enjoying a monopoly? Or is there in some sense, what the heck do you mean by competition? Is there in some sense competition among experts? Okay. If you have a monopoly expert deciding for you, as with like central bank monetary policy or state-run eugenics programs, then you have a high chance of expert failure. I call that the rule of experts. You know, for me, it's totally thumbs down on the rule of experts. It's like a myth for the other forms here, you know. The really groovy thing, oops, I used it non-ironically. The really groovy thing is self-rule or autonomy, wherein the experts are in some strong sense genuinely competing, they can freely enter, and they have contrary interests, that I want your business, he wants your business, so we're at competition. But we're just giving you advice. So the big example that I like for that is Consumer Reports. Okay? So you don't have to buy their toaster, okay? But you know, and if they start giving bad advice, that you know, the Consumer Reports recommends the good toaster, bad toaster, the safe car, the dangerous car. And if you don't like their advice, well, there's other, there's Underwriters Limited, there's CNET, pardon me, et cetera, et cetera. There's other providers of that kind of expertise. That's your lowest chance of expert failure. In fact, I searched for examples of expert failure from Consumer Reports, and I almost couldn't find any. They were all in the direction of like overcautious with consumer. They were, they really, come out clean. So these are the key points from tonight. So sorry I ran over more than I even should have. I'm so sorry. Expert failure is an important problem. It's for real, and we should maybe ought to think about doing something about it. It's more likely when experts have monopoly power and when experts choose for non-experts. We should therefore, and now I quote the last words of the book, we should therefore value expertise, but fear expert power. Thank you very much. Is there a Q&A then? And who moderates the Q&A, me or thee? Yeah, solve all problems, no questions.
You're an expert.
That bothers me. That's the problem with reflexivity. Discussed in the book, it's like a big deal, actually. No, it's a big deal.
So you define an expert as somebody paid for their opinion. Why is the guy who built the narrowest bridge on the cover? I mean, he's paid to build bridges. So why is he an example in expert failure? Or like in medical malpractice, experts fail all the time because of different technological reasons, things like that, where those experts fail and diagnose wrong. I guess that would be an opinion.
Well, yeah, the medical doctor, right? You let me off the hook because it's the example also is the medical doctor. Because they provide, they're like a farm mechanic, right? They provide, on one hand, expert advice, but then also, like, right. So they are experts. I see what you mean. I like it. I don't care. I like it. I like it because, you know, they're supposed to, like, they had all this technical knowledge and science, and then the thing fell down. Contrast that with the Brooklyn Bridge. Roebling, anybody know Roebling's first name? John? No, it was Roebling. This great engineer built also a suspension bridge, but unlike the engineers designing the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, or apparently unlike them, he knew that his knowledge was not very good. So he did all this, you know, circa 1880 calculations and all like that, figured out like how strong all different pieces had to be, and it's like, 6. I'm going to make everything 6 times stronger than this calculation says to do. Okay? Not only did Roebling's bridge not collapse within a year of opening, still running today, carrying a much heavier traffic than I imagine he could have anticipated in 1880, whatever, when he built it. Well, it's a rough crowd. He immediately went right for the jugular. He scored a hit.
So I have kind of a related question. But so if you define as like an expert being paid for their opinion, I'm curious where you draw the line, because it seems like everybody to a certain extent, like when you pay for their service, like a laborer, for example, you buy their decision-making power. So like, for example, like a NASCAR driver, to a certain extent, you are paying for his opinion in the instance in which, like, you know, is it a smart move to maybe move around or like draft behind another?
Oh, I see what you mean.
So like, where do you draw the line?
No. In that exact example, I think I'm cool. I'm not too upset if it turns out that there's some ambiguity about sort of what falls in and what doesn't fall in. Because I got an out for that I think is not just an out, I think it's for real. It's a point of view on human interactions. Okay? Just like the economic point of view is a point of view on human interaction, doesn't have to be the only point of view. Okay? So all of a sudden I'm not too concerned if it's like at one level universally applicable, you know, but maybe ambiguous when it's a useful tool or something like that. Yeah, right. That's really the question. When is this theory useful? But your exact example, I don't think requires that response, because you're not telling me your opinion about whether you should, you know, draft behind the next car or try to surpass it. You just do it. You're making a decision, not sharing your opinion.
So that's to do when somebody's verbalizing or directly exchanging.
Oh, yeah. Right. So there's the expert and the non-expert, and the expert gives advice or opinion to the non-expert, and they're different people. Right. Well, I'm so sorry if I wasn't enough clear about that. Yeah.
Run off the wall question? Well, sort of off the wall. I'll give it to you anyway. I was just, when you're talking about this, I started thinking about rational expectations as, in a sense, being a thing where economists have somehow worked in the criticism of the monopoly expert. Because rational expectations is that part of the idea was that Keynes is the expert. He knows how to model the economy, and nobody else can ever figure it out. And this was a kind of a check. Is that kind of what the idea is?
Yeah. I mean,
So the average person would have the same model Keynes has. They can figure it out.
Yeah. So I think there is a kind of deep interconnection between the rational expectations of, you know, Lucas and especially Lucas, I think, actually, even more than Sargent. Muth was, I think, more sort of narrow, always a micro, you know. But I mean, I think there's a deep interconnection between the Lucas critique that you're referring to and, you know, the vision of this book, which is a kind of deep epistemic egalitarianism. But Lucas, I think, made a kind of really deep error. So you're right, you know, it comes along and there's Keynesian economics, and it's like, oh, the economists are smart and the people are dumb. And so we'll, like, you know, adjust the levers of the economy and make things work for those stupid people in spite of themselves. And Lucas said, no, the economists are smart, and the people are smart. I would have gone in a different direction to get the same epistemic parity between the people and the economists. Not over the smart, but over the dumb. Yeah, you know, Keynesians are not wrong, people are dumb. So are we economists. So instead of smart economics, I like dumb economics. That's my thing. No, not off the wall. Deep interconnection there.
Where does the disbelieving of experts or the kind of downplaying experts, where does that line cross when it gets in some ways almost dangerous? Where you get people trusting their own intuition or their own pseudoscience, you know, for instance, like anti-vaccination, flat earth, things like that. Where does this distrust of experts become dangerous?
A flat earth. Yeah, the flat earthers are a puzzle. I more understand the anti-vax people. But the flat earthers are they're just head scratchers. You know? I mean, I've been on like islands where you can just see that you know, the horizon is, we think of the horizon, I always thought horizon like on a flat piece of paper, but actually, of course, you know, so we know abstractly it bends around. But then when you see it, it's like amazing. Anyway, so I don't get it now. I guess that's what I should point to here is this. On the one hand, I'm giving a theory of experts and a theory of expert failure, information choice theory and the corresponding theory of expert failure. So I'm engaged in a nerdy academic exercise. If non-academics err in sort of like when they doubt and when they trust experts, okay, I wrote a book. I don't think they erred because I wrote a book. So I could just, you know, pilot like, you know, wash my hands, you know. And I guess that would be actually totally kosher. But the problem that you raise is still a real one. So, I mean, I guess at the level of just like invocation, yeah, got to value expertise. So it's expert power that I'm objecting to, not somehow expertise. How can you question, how can you disvalue expertise? Right? Because so many of your choices require the expertise of others. Yeah? But expert power, yeah, that's kind of my thing. It's a deeply, in the, you know, Adam Smith type of sense, it's a deeply liberal project. Right? It's an anti-power project. But yeah, that doesn't fix the problem of like flat earthers and that. Yeah, I don't know. If you have wisdom on that, please share it. Well, maybe you don't tonight, but maybe next week or 10 years you will.
If experts aren't necessarily smarter than the general population, what qualities allow to talk about the position that they do?
The quality of having been private to share it. So like, you want to be a medical doctor. You have to be smart to be a medical doctor. Well, not if you're my doctor. Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, sure. The medical profession has set up these entry barriers to the profession. Okay, and part of kind of what you need realistically to get over it is just like intelligence. Now, I don't think they're smarter or dumber, actually. I think there's preparation and hard work. So already, you know, I'm a little, but okay, yeah, those barriers have to be over. But what about, you know, a baseball umpire? You don't have to be like smart to be, you know, a baseball umpire. You just have to be the one in charge of saying whether the ball is on this side of the line and thus fair, or on that side of the line and thus foul. Okay? And that example, baseball umpire, very useful also because, you know, the umpire absolutely does not need to have more knowledge of baseball than the players. It's just that that's the person elected to, that's the person paid to make the judgment. Is that an answer, by the way? Great. I always worry, you know, I've got my, you know, thing that and then somebody asks a question, am I responding to the person's question or just talking to myself? I hope I can respond to those.
With a greater division of labor, do you think we'll have a growing dependence on expertise, knowledge? And do you think that increases the danger of expert power? Or it just seems like this concept getting worse and worse and worse, where if you're, a high level academic, you might not know anything about your car, and you're very dependent on a mechanic for his expert knowledge.
Well, sure. I mean, that's the thing, right? Is that we live in highly ramified division of labor. And the good thing too, that's what makes us all rich. I mean, you can't understand until you really confront the numbers, and even then, I don't know, the difference between the global average level of life now, which compared to GDP is not that great, and like the historical levels it was before 1800. And it's just like, man. And that's the division of, it's more than just the division of labor, but without that, there is no division, without division of labor, there is no such level. So we can't somehow just spurn expertise. The problem is with us. Okay? Do we have to be in the thrall of the experts, therefore? No. What we have to do is fear expert power. We can't have the monopoly expert. That's the bad thing. Okay? If we're competing experts, okay, and we are like competing basically for your business or good opinion, okay? And I get up and I'm like, I'm really an expert. You can't. I'm a wizard. If I'm a monopoly expert, that's the temptation. Because then you'd be like, okay, I don't know, guess he's right. It'd be like that one picture now. But if I do that, Charles got a great strategy available to him. He can get up and well, Roger was talking about this, and this is what he meant by the other thing, and this is what he thinks. And he's mistaken because X, Y, Z, but he's going to teach you so that you can see with your actual eyes what the issues are. Now, who's got the upper hand? Me or Charles? Charles, the teacher. Right? So my view is that competition turns wizards into teachers. Okay? That's what we want. That's the low power solution. There's no panacea, of course, the world is imperfect, and so we can't expect just like, roast pigeons to fly into our mouths, if we just didn't have whatever, But we can have less power to experts, more competition, more teaching, less wizardliness. That's something that I strongly desire, express, and want. And we can get it. Professional organizations like the AMA should not have the power over licensure that they have. In fact, occupational licensure altogether is a way to create, promote, and sustain expert power, and so on, right? So it translates into like policy stuff.
Thank you all. We're out of time for questions, but if you'd like to come after, we'll be prepared a hot sec. And next week we also have Dr. Azak, who is an assistant professor at the Kirby Center right now, and he's going to be speaking on democratic socialism. So look out for the information next week. But that's all for tonight. Thank you guys for coming in. Give a round of applause for